Good morning, everybody. How are you? I'm here. Horses are an incredible creature. They've helped us with our agriculture, with our transport, and they've died in their millions in our wars. Without the horse, there would be no Egyptian or Roman or Greek empire. The British Empire wouldn't have existed, and the wild west of America would not have been settled without the horse. They've been a very faithful companion. How have we treated them? But more of that later. About me. I was born at a very early age in the grounds of Hampton Court Palace by the side of the River Thames. And I grew up with horses. I saw horses every day. Horses used to pull the milk cart around the place. The coalman used to have his cart. The rag and bone man, the scrap dealer, used to come around the cart. I saw gypsies with their horses. And then when I was 5 years old, my mother and dad took me to a place called Wembley Stadium, and we saw a Wild West show. And there I met a man who changed my life. His name was Tex Ritter, and he was a cowboy. And I thought, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I'm going to be a cowboy, which was a bit difficult because there weren't although there were horses in London pulling carts, there weren't too many cows. But I used to fantasize about cowboy. I had a cowboy hat, a little rocking horse I called Mobo, and that was fantastic. And then something else took over. When I was 13, 14 years old, I discovered Pete Seeger, the Kingston Trio, Peter, Paul and Mary, folk music. And that was incredible. That took me around the world. I left home when I was 16, went to America. I met my friend John Denver and worked with Paul Simon and people like that. And then the idea of being a cowboy sort of faded a little bit. And then in 1974, I thought I'd go somewhere else. I thought I wanted to go somewhere else for a holiday. So I looked on the globe and I saw at the bottom of the globe, there's a big lump of land. It was called Australia. Now, I'd heard on fairly good authority they spoke some form of English down there. So I headed off with 57 pounds in my pocket, one-way ticket, my guitar and my banjo off to Australia just for a 6-month holiday. When I got there, my friend who had been there, got there before, he said, "Hey, Trev," he said, "would you like to go on a television show?" I said, "Television? They have television in Australia?" Yeah, they did. So I went in for this talent contest, sort of like Pop Idol. It was called National Star Quest. And I got in the heats. And I got through the heats, and then I got in the semi-finals. And I got through the semi-finals, and then I got to the finals, and I won the damn thing. Hey, long time ago. Guess what first prize was? A cruise. But what happened then was that I got to the notice of some agents, and they gave me gigs, and eventually one of them phoned said, "Hey, would you like to have a 3-month gig job?" I said, "Where?" He said, "Down at the snowfields." I was amazed. You have snow in Australia? So I got in my car and I drove down to a little beautiful alpine village called Trevor Alpine Hotel. I was working there. And I drove down, I went through a place called Cooma, and then to Jindabyne, and then I looked up at the snowy mountains. And I remember my friend John, and I'm going to talk about this in a later show, John talking about when he first saw the Rocky Mountains, changed his life. Same effect. I remember driving up the Alpine Way towards the village with the music of Rocky Mountain High in my head. And I got there and I spent the most incredible 3 months skiing and just enjoying the snow. And it is a beautiful place, the Snowy Mountains. And then the season ended and I didn't want to leave. So I did anything. I worked in other bars. And then one thing I did do, I did learn to ride a horse when I was at school. I was helping with the riding school, taking tourists out around the mountains. Anyway, one day, a group of stockmen, for those of you who don't know what a stockman is, it's an Australian cowboy. They turned up to the village and they were looking for people to help them because they'd lost 22 brumbies, which are Australian wild horses, in the bush, and they needed people to get them in. So they were looking to see if anybody could ride. And it was a day's work. I mean, they were going to pay me. So they said, "Would you like a day's work?" I said, "Yes, please." So I got in the back of their ute, pickup, and we drove over Dead Horse Gap, the Alpine Way, down to a place called Tom Grogan Station, one of the last great cattle stations of the Snowy Mountains, 250,000 acres. Anyway, I met the head stockman, Sandy. He said, "Okay, mate." He said, "That's your horse over there." So I walked over there. It was a big Australian stock horse with a big Australian saddle. And I'd never ridden an Australian saddle. I said, excuse me, Sandy. I said, how do you ride an Australian stock horse? He gave me some very good advice. He said, well, you don't bloody well fall off for a start. So I got on the horse and he led me down. He said, okay, you come with me, lad. So we went down, and we went down to this little creek crossing. And there's a little creek crossing there. He said, no, over that rise there, he said, there were 22 wild horses. He said, now we want to get them in those yards over there. He said, now, what happens to the bloody mongrels? He said, they come over that rise, they go over this creek crossing, they're off again. Takes us hours to get them back there. He said, what I want you to do, I want you to stand there, sit there on your horse. He said, now, when you see them horses trotting over that rise, when they come trotting over that rise, will you do me a favour? He said, shush them in the yards over there. You do that, lad, will you? I said, yeah, okay. So I'm sitting there on this beautiful horse. His name was Bobby. And it was a beautiful day, beautiful spring day in the snowy mountains. Oh, it's gorgeous. And I'm sitting there, the birds and the flowers were out. And Bobby was lovely drink, and it was so quiet. But I could hear over the rise, woof, woof, the dogs and people shouting, and the dogs and it was very quiet. But I'm sitting here, and the little creek's burbling, and then suddenly, everything goes quiet. But I feel it. There was a vibration coming up the horse's legs. I thought, oh, earthquake. And the vibration gets more and more, and suddenly the vibration turns into a low rumble, and the low rumble gets louder, and suddenly 22 wild horses come over that rise. And they are not trotting, ladies and gentlemen. They are coming at a flat gallop, and they're coming to the one place they can get away from their tormentors. And that one place is the creek crossing. But sitting on his horse in the front of that creek crossing is little Pommy Trev. Ladies and gentlemen, they came at me at a flat gallop. They came at me, and I tell you what, single-handedly, I stopped those 22 wild horses, and I got them in the yards single-handedly. I think it was my screams of abject terror that... So they actually went in the yards. So Sandy comes over the way. He says, hey, how'd you do that, lad? I said, skill. He said, well, would you like a job? And so I got a job. For the next couple of years, I was working as a stockman in the cattle station at Tom Grogan Station. And I will be doing some shows about this and singing you some songs about my time there. And I can remember a couple of weeks after I was there, I kept Bobby, the stock horse. I learned the old whip. And I was down a place called Omeo Creek, and I was mustering some Hereford cattle down there. And I suddenly realised I was a cowboy. I was a cowboy. And I realised that any country that can fulfil the dreams of your childhood must be an incredible country. And a year to the day of arriving in Australia, I became an Australian citizen. I'm very proud of that. And so anyway, I spent 2 years there. Then I met my first wife, Helen, and we got married. And we moved to a little place called Berry. And I bought myself a horse. He was a wonderful off the racetrack, a big grey 16-2 thoroughbred, name of Ben Cody. And he was wonderful. And I used to go riding over the rolling hills of Broughton Vale where we lived, and all was right. He cost me $600, but it was $600 well spent. After a couple of months, Helen comes up to me. She says, Trevor? Yes, dear, I said. You have to be scared of her a bit. She said, you've got a horse? I said, yes, I have. She said, I want a horse as well. So I said, oh, okay. So we looked around and we found this lovely little 15-2 bay Anglo-Arabian mare. And her name was Tiffany. And she was lovely. Cost me $400, but that was worth it. And together we would go riding over the rolling hills of Broughton Vale, and all was right with the world. Anyway, a little while after that, Helen comes up to me and goes, Trevor? She said, yes. I said, yes, dear. She said, I want to put Tiffany in foal. So I said, well, it's your horse, fine. She said, I've been down to Campbellwarra. I've seen a friend of the stud down there, Verdenfell, they've got 3 stallions. I said, yes. They said, I've got 2 older ones. And she said, there's a young grey colt there. I like him. And she said, he's for sale for $1,000. I said, $1,000? I could buy a guitar for that. But I'd heard about this grave fella, you see, because I'd been down the local feed store, and the local lad said, he said, here, mister, look at that bloody mongrel down at Bennett's place. I said, yeah, I wouldn't touch that one. He said, bloody mongrel, he's a desperado, got a bad reputation. Wouldn't touch him. I said, look, we're not going to buy, last thing I need is another horse. I've got enough. 2 horses, you don't need more than 2 horses. Yeah. So anyway, so I said, look, put the mare in foal. So I took the mare down to Bennett's place, and she, in due time, went in foal to this grey thing, right? So I had to go down and pick her up. So I drove down afterwards, and Jeff Bennett came. He said, okay, Trevor, he said, your mare's in foal. I said, great. I said, throw on the truck, I'll take her home. He said, but would you like to look at the stallion? I said, not really. He said, no, he said, you really should look at the stallion. He's for sale, you know. I said, I do not want to buy a stallion. He said, no, but he said, if you go and look at the stallion, you'll see what the foal looks like. Now, that sounded pretty logical to me, right? So we walk around, and we sort of, and we come down to this big round metal pen. And on the other side of the metal pen, there are 3 stables. There's a stable with one stallion, another one on the other side, and in the middle, there's the stable is completely blacked out with carpet, completely blacked out. And I said, what's in the middle stable? He said, well, that's the colt. I said, but why is he blacked out? He said, well, if you leave them in the dark long enough, their eyes grow bigger. I never worked that one out. So then I said, okay. I said, well, go and get him out and have a look at him. Now, I should have known, you see, because what he said, no, I won't get him out, I'll let him out. So I said, all right. So he gets into the yard, and he sort of walks around like this. And he grabs it, and he rips the door open, and then he jumps out like a Olympic high jump out of the... And anyway, so I'm standing here on the other side of it, and suddenly I see this sort of white flash comes out of the stable, shakes him, throws himself up in the air, and lands on his back, goes bang on the ground, and gets up and goes like that. And then he looks at me, and I look at him, and he charges me, and he comes straight up to me. Oh, and then he stops. And then he looked at me. And I looked at him. And then he looked at me. And I put my hand out. And he put his muzzle in my hand. And I took him home. His name was Oasis Desert Song. He is a legend in the endurance riding field. He was a great horse. I learnt so much from him. I won many, many races with that horse. He enabled me to win 5 Quilty National Championship buckles, 100-mile races. And in 1983, myself and Desert, we broke a world record. He ran the Shahzada Endurance Test, which is 250 miles, 400 kilometers, in a time of 27 hours and 1 minute. It was a time that has very rarely been beaten. Just by comparison, they won that ride last year on a slightly shorter course in 36 hours. Desert was a fast horse. He was incredible. I learnt so much. I learnt that he had a soul, he had a spirit. He was my friend and my teacher. His son, Armistice, helped me win a lot as well. In fact, I was chosen to be part of the Australian team, the World Equestrian Team, in 1998. And we went over to Dubai to race against 360 horses, 60 different nations, ladies and gentlemen. And our Australian team, we won! A bronze medal. Guess who won? You won't believe. The Kiwis won the gold, and another country called United States of America won silver. But it was an incredible experience, and I mean, he enabled me to Armistice. I went over to Canada, I rode the Rocky Mountain Challenge, and I met a fellow called Chris Irwin who taught me an awful lot about natural horse communication. But getting back to Desert, Desert was an incredible horse. We would win a lot, and he was just had that star quality. And I wanted to I wanted to keep going because I was very, very competitive in those days. I really liked to win. And Desert couldn't run everything. He couldn't. So we decided that we were going to get another horse. So we looked around and we found this beautiful Anglo-Arabian grey mare. And her name was from Marbella. And she was a racing machine. She just loved to run. I mean, I equate Desert to a Ferrari. He had a V12 motor, highly tuned. He had beautiful brakes, incredible steering. Belle was more like an old V8 Mustang. A big engine, V8, drum brakes, and damn, no steering. But by golly, could she run. And so I was competing with both horses. And one day, one season, Desert was out for a spell. And I had this big, long spell with Belle. And we went into a competition called South Coast Rider of the Year, which competed on 5 different rides. Now, it was a point-scoring thing, and if you won it, you would become South Coast champion horse and rider. Belle and myself, we were on top form. And in the first 4 rides, we'd done so well that by the time we got to the last run, which was the Shoalhaven River Run, a 60-mile run, we were so far ahead that all we had to do was to get 4th place, and we would have won the championship. Belle was great. So we went down to the Shoalhaven, and what with endurance, you start with legs. You have the first 30-mile leg. The horse is brought in after the first 30 miles. It's checked by the vets to make sure that it's not stressed in any way. Pulse is down. It's not lame. There's no problems with the horse. And then you have a half-hour rest, and you're allowed to continue. So we went around the first 30 miles, and Belle just trotted around this. We came in, and we were in the driver's seat. We were standing in 4th position, and 5th position was 20 minutes behind us. I had it made. I took Belle up to the vets. The vet checked her. He said, by golly, he said, have you taken this horse out yet? She's like she hasn't been out. She's as fresh as a daisy. I said, no, she is. He said, where are you, Trev? I said, well, I'm in 4th position. He said, you've got it made, haven't you? I said, I sure have. My problem was that although the 5th place was 20 minutes behind me, 10 minutes in front was Terry Woods in the first position on a magnificent big gelding called Sharif. Now, Sharif had the speed and the guts, and he was a really competitive horse. And Belle and Sharif had been competing for the whole year. Terry was a very competitive rider as well. But he was 10 minutes in front of me. I did my sums. I had 30 miles to run. I had a fresh horse. Sharif was 10 minutes. I could not only win the championship, I could win the last race. So after a few minutes, we got Belle all ready. We went up to the starting post, and I stood there. Terry got on Sharif. Come on, Sharif, boy. Whack! Off he went, you see. And then the 2nd place went off, and the 3rd place went off, and I waited 10 minutes, my thing. Got on Belle. Come on, sweetheart, we can go. Off she goes. So we're going, and she knew where Sharif was. She knew where everything was. We come round the corner, and there's the 3rd place. He's just trotting. I go past him like he's standing still. See you later. Eat my dust, and we're off. I'm in 3rd position. About a few minutes later, I see in the distance the 2nd horse. And he again is slowing down a bit. Belle's not slowing down. She just speeds up, and she goes past him. Wow. See you later, man. And I'm off. Anyway, in the front, Terry had thought, well, Trev's got the championship. He's going to take it easy. I might as well just take it easy. He didn't know I was coming up fast behind him. So he's going down this straight, and he's sort of just trotting Sharif, admiring the flowers. And suddenly he turns around, and he sees Belle thundering down this hill towards Sharif. So he's not going to stand for that, because he's not going to get beaten by bloody 90. So whack, he hits old Sharif, and off he goes. Belle's going, come on there. Come on, Bella. So we're going down this road. We are going flat gallop. Now, endurance riding, you saw a couple of pictures of those horses in the rock. That is what we do with endurance riding. It is a tough sport. We do some pretty tough stuff on those horses, and these horses are incredible. So we're going down this flat. Suddenly, the hill turns down to the left and goes down a really steep gully, down to a gully, and a big sort of U-turn at the bottom, and then up the other side of the gully and off, you see. So Terry comes, okay, come and shoot down the hill. Whack, go on, boy, go on. Down the hill he goes, down the hills. down to the bottom, round the bend and up the other side of the gully. And I'm like, come on, Belle, come on, sweetheart. She's going down, she goes down, right down the bottom. She hits the back, and then she slips on a loose rock, and she just goes straight over. I go flying off at a flat gallop, and I land on my back at about 25 miles an hour. Bang, on a rock. Now, I am hurt. I know I'm hurt because my back is swelling up and I'm dazed. The first thing that came into my mind, we're in the middle of the bush, and about 3 months before that, a fellow called Peter Cole on his horse called Zadaka at the Quilty Ride, which was the national championship, had fallen off his horse, had broken his nose. So what he did, the next rider that came through, he said, take my horse back, I'll wait for some help. It's very difficult to get any help out in the bush. And he was there for over 4 or 5 hours. By the time they did get him out, the broken nose was the least of his worries. He nearly died from hypothermia, and they actually had to get a helicopter to get him to the hospital. This was all going through my rather dazed mind. Now, Belle, at that time, when she fell over, she got up, she realized I wasn't there anymore. Now, if you're a natural horseman, the horses don't run away from you, they want to be with you. And she just stood there and waited for me. And I'm feeling bad. Oh, God. So, stand there, sweetheart. So I got on her. And I'm really in pain, you know. I said, take me home, girl. Take me home. And she did. I went past the first check when I started really badly hurt. And that's the last I remember of it for the next 25 miles. That magnificent mare followed the track. Because she hadn't been around that track before. She followed the track or followed Terry's scent. And she got me those 25 miles back to base camp in about an hour and 20 minutes. I was unconscious most of the time. So I don't know how she didn't lose me. But when I got back to base camp, it took about 3 people to get me off the horse. I ended up in Shoalhaven District Hospital with massive blood transfusions. I'd lost about 2/3 of my blood internally hemorrhaging. When I came out of intensive care, the doctor said, you know, you were a very lucky man. And I was conscious again. He said, you're very lucky. He said, another hour, he said, that would have been it. You would have been dead. That day, Balfron Marbella saved my life. But the most incredible thing about that was after they'd got me off to hospital, some friends of mine took her back to the farm. The following day, Bella couldn't walk herself. She cracked 2 bones in her back. So she must have been in incredible pain. But she got me home and saved my life. She got better. I got better. She won a lot more things, and it was fantastic. She was a wonderful horse. She won rides with Helen and Bromley, my daughter, and Tristan, my son. She was just the most magnificent thing. Anyway, time passed, and Helen and myself parted company. I met the love of my life, Maya, and we got married, and we moved to Bulahdelah with our family. By that time, I was up to about 16 horses. And I had a wonderful stallion. You saw some images of him. His name is Jericho, and he's just a darling horse. Beautiful show horse. He's a really royal breeding. A couple of world champions in his breeding, but he's a magnificent horse. But at that time, he was a virgin. He hadn't sort of seen any mares. He was only a 4-year-old colt. Now, a lot of people think the stallions sort of do it naturally. They don't, because they don't have any books to read. And you've got to be fairly careful. I mean, I don't believe in hobbling horses or restricting horses in any way, as a lot of people do. I never tie horses up, and I never use any force with them. So I think everything for me has got to be very natural. And so for a young colt, he's got to have a good stallion, a good mare to help him. Because, you know, a young stallion, he knows some things, but, you know, if he doesn't quite know where to put things, if you know what I mean. And, well, you know, and you know, things can be put in the wrong place. And if you've got a cranky mare, then sort of, you know, you're not putting that there. Whack, you get kicked. It puts you off for life. Doesn't it? You know. I'm not talking from experience, don't I? So, Belle, on the other hand, was the most magnificent horse. She was in every way she was wonderful, except for one. She was subfertile. She only ever had 4 foals in her life. Now, She was 32 years old at this time. That is very old for a horse. And she was obviously infertile. But the one thing she did like, she liked the men, right? She might not be have foals, but she did like to, if you know what I mean. So anyway, so one day I was looking at, and Jericho's in the paddock and sort of munching away. And Bill's over here in another paddock. She's looking over at Jericho and she says, "Hello, big boy." And she's winking at him. Not with her eye either. And Jericho's sort of a bit confused. He says, "Mrs. Robinson, are you trying to seduce me?" I thought, what the hell? You know, I mean, come on, give him a bit of experience. So I put them in together, and it was beautiful to see it. I mean, Jericho, you know, he just loved this mare, and she loved him. And they lived together for quite a while. You know, Belle was the queen of our herd. I mean, she was above Alpha. She was just a beautiful. And so she would walk around like the queen, and he would follow like a courtier. Oh, isn't she beautiful? Isn't she beautiful? But it was lovely to see this magnificent horse, this 32-year-old mare, who had saved my life and made something so much special for my family, to have so much happiness in her dotage. Anyway, one day, Maya was saying, "I'm going out shopping, Trev." I said, "Fine." I said, "Well, once I'm going to feed the horses." So Maya went out the car, and I sort of got the feed ready, and I sort of walked down to the paddock. And it's Jericho. "Hello, Jericho." "Yeah, boy. Good boy, good boy." Into his food. And I walked over to Belle's food, and I put it down there. I walked away. And then I turned around, and Jericho was sort of vacuuming up his food as he does. But Belle was just standing there. She wasn't interested in her food, which is a bad sign because horses usually love their food. And she's just sitting there looking disinterested. So I walked up to her. I said, "What's wrong, sweetheart?" She just didn't look right. She looked not right in the eye. So I thought, I'll go and get a halter, and I'll take her up, take her pulse and see what's going on. So I got a halter, and by the time I came back, things were getting worse. She was looking really bad. And I was just holding her, and then suddenly she started to shake all over, and I thought, what's going on? Her eyes were flickering, and suddenly she started to go weak in the knees, and then she put her head up against my chest, and then she started to go down. And she went down. I held her head, and then she put her head in my lap. And she died in my arms. How did I feel? Whew. Strangely, I felt honoured. I felt exhilarated in some ways. This beautiful mare, who I'd had so many years, so many memories, and so many trails, she chose to take the last journey with me. If she had died in the middle of the night and I'd gone out and seen her body in the paddock, I would have been devastated. Did she suffer? Why wasn't I there? But I was. It was a heart attack, and she died as she lived, on her own terms. Oof. So I thought, well, I'd better phone Mayo. So first of all, I phoned Bob, the Bobcat man. I said, "Bob," I said, "look, I've got a horse I need you to come and bury." He said, "Okay, I'll be over in a couple of hours." Then I phoned Mayo, and I just about to press the button, and the phone rang. It was Mayo. I said, "Trev," I said, "yes." She said, "The car's just died." This is true. The car's, I said, "What?" "She's just down, the car just stopped." I said, "What's going on?" So I said, "Belle just died." "Oh." I said, "Look, I'm waiting for Bob to come and bury her." I said, I'll come out with the car." I took the other car out. She took the good car home, and I fixed the old car. It was a loose wire. And I drove back about 20 minutes later. And when I got back in the house, Maya wasn't in the house, and I looked around, and she was down in the paddock, and she's sitting on a rock just a little way off from Belle, with a video camera. I said, "What's going on there?" So I looked down, I walked down, and she's there with a video camera, photographing Belle on the ground, Jericho standing above her, and Jericho is trying to lift Belle's feet, and he's trying to get her up. But the most incredible thing is that I've never seen this before. He's crying. There are tears coming down that horse's face and falling on the body of his mare. I said, let's just leave him. He needs to get through this. So we walked away. After about an hour, it was like something had left Belle, and he walked away. Bob turned up, and we dug a grave for her, and we gently buried her in the hole and put the earth back there. That night, he stood on her grave like a statue. I know that because I came out and it was a full moon and he was just standing there keeping guard, sentinel over the body of his mare on the grave. He didn't move at all that night. Didn't make a noise, just stood there on the body of his mare. The following morning, he's up there, and now, as I said, Belle only had four foals, but one of them was a horse called Liberty. Now, Liberty at that time was 25 years old. She was old, and she was totally infertile. She'd never ever had a foal. In fact, she was totally the opposite, Belle. She didn't even like me. You're not coming near me with that thing. Hated it. But suddenly she'd come down from the mountain, and she's standing there. She's looking over the fence and saying, "Hello, big boy, but what's going on here?" And she's winking at Jericho, not with her eye again. So I put them together. And you know, it was strange. Jericho fell in love with Belle's daughter. And almost a year to the day of Belle passing, she dropped her one and only foal that we still have, and her name is Phoenix. Now, my last little story is something that is an ongoing thing. I'm going to be my next storytelling session is I'm going to tell you about some great horses in history and some incredible stories. But I had an old thoroughbred mare called Kate. Kate was a lovely mare. She wasn't very sociable. She was a bit cranky. Not a nice soft horse like a lot of Arabians are. But she was a lovely horse. She was a lovely horse. But Jericho rather loved her. So I thought, well, you know, no excuse in the taste. But anyway, so they got together and they had this beautiful little chestnut filly that we call Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo. And she was beautiful. I remember when I used to do my demonstrations, I would bring Kalamazoo out, and she was really proud, and she was like a built on springs, little Anglo-Arabian mare filly, and she'd run around and tail between her ears, and people said, "Oh, she's so beautiful, you know." I said, "Yes." He said, "Is she for sale?" I said, and there was something at the back of my mind saying, no, she's not for sale. Not yet. She's too young. And then she got bigger, and people said, "Oh, we're going to buy." I said, No. There was something I didn't want to sell her, you know. Anyway, I was off to do a cruise, believe it or not. And a couple of weeks before, I thought, I'd just start training. I don't break horses. I train horses. I hate that word break. So I started to train her. And she was just very responsive. And I got her to the stage. Got the saddle on. I was just riding her around the ring. And she was lovely. She was just a lovely horse. No one else had touched her. Just me. Beautiful. Went off on a cruise. I did one of these talks. And at the end of the talk, people come up and they had to talk to you, and this woman came up to me, Renee, and she said, "Look, you know, I'd really like to talk to you about some stuff about horses." I said, "I could talk horses all day." So she said, "Well, can we meet at the coffee bar at 3:00 and have a chat?" So I said, "Yeah, fine, lovely." So I met her there, and she's sitting there, and I walk up and sit down. She said, "You know, I do love horses." I said, "That's lovely." So I really, really want to ride a horse. And I said, "I do have a problem." And I said, "I think I know what your problem is." She said, "You do?" I said, "Is it anything to do with your guide dog?" Holly. She's blind. Renee's been blind from birth. But she's the sort of person that treats blindness as a challenge, not as a handicap. She skis, she does everything. She said, "I've always wanted to ride a horse." I said, "Well, plenty. You can ride for the riding for the disabled. They got these leads, they can lead you." She said, No. I want to ride a horse. You know, I just want to ride. I don't want to be led around like a donkey. I want to ride a horse. So I said, "Fine. I suppose we could find an old horse that would do that sort of thing." I said, "You know, fair enough." So I said, but why don't you come down and visit me with your husband and come and visit the farm, and I'll introduce you to some of my horses, you know. So they turned up, and I introduced her to, you know, Jericho, my wonderful horse Paris, and little Tequila, and a few other horses, you know. And then I said, I tell you what, I said, I've got a little, come and meet this lovely little filly. She's gorgeous, she's gorgeous. So I introduced her to Kalamazoo. And you're going to see the film in a minute. It was incredible, what happened with Kalamazoo. Suddenly there was this bonding, and it was just like, this is why I never sold this horse, because this horse was Renee's right from the start. And they just made it off together. You will see in the film that there's no bit on this horse's mouth. I don't like using bits. There's a bit of metal in the mouth. It's a horrible thing. And I've never tied a horse up. I don't like to tie horses up. The ropes are just loosely slacked over a pole, and that's it. I never restrict them. And Kalamazoo basically works from a voice command. And one voice command which I find very easy, very difficult, very essential with young Renee is duck. Because if you go into a tree, she can't see the trees, you see, so she ducks. But Kalamazoo has learned all the trails, and she goes out with Renee just by herself, and it's just an amazing thing. So, Stuart, if you could, we'd like to play that. Thank you very much indeed for listening to this.
The earth is our mother, just turning around, with the trees in the forest and roots underground. Our Father above us, whose sigh is the wind, paint us a rainbow without any end. As the river runs freely, the mountain does rise. Let me touch with my fingers and see with my eyes. In the hearts of the children, a pure love still grows, like a bright star in heaven that lights our way home, like the flower that shattered the stone. Sparrows find freedom beholding the sun in the infinite beauty. We're all joined in one. I reach out before me and look to the sky. Did I hear someone whisper? Did something pass by? As the river runs freely, the mountain does rise. Let me touch with my fingers and see with my eyes. In the hearts of the children, a pure love still grows, like a bright star in heaven that lights our way home, like the flower that shattered the stone. Like a bright star in heaven that lights our way home,